All right. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. I am Dr. Demiso A. Josie, CEO of the Empowerment Perspective Group. I want to give a big shout out to my partner in crime, Jamie Cohen, who is allowing you people come into the room and all that. So thank you for your help, Jamie. Appreciate you there. So those of you, if you missed part one, you can check our website out, theempowermentperspective.com. We talked to specifically new and aspiring assistant principals, and we basically talked about how your day-to-day life would be as an assistant principal. Also, just some housekeeping things. I am in New Jersey, and we have some strong thunderstorms moving through at the moment. So if I lose power, I'll definitely make sure I'm back on Tuesday of next week. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We can get this in. So definitely appreciate everybody for checking in with us tonight. And we're talking about part two, interview tips and techniques. And basically what I'm going to do is talk about some of the good things and the bad things that I personally went through in the interview process, and some of the things that I look for as an educational leader in the interview process. I've seen some pretty good interviewees, and I've seen some pretty bad ones as well. So I'm going to hopefully give you some tips and things and tricks that hopefully set you apart from everyone else when it comes to your interview for the assistant principal role or any role that you are currently looking for. So by way of an introduction, again, I am Dr. Demiso A. Josie, CEO and founder of the Empowerment Perspective Group. I am currently an assistant principal at an elementary school in New Jersey. Prior to that, I was a middle school assistant principal. And prior to that, I was also a high school teacher. So I have experience in all three levels of public education in New Jersey. In a former life, I used to work for ESPN and ABC as an operations manager and associate director. So I kind of got the leadership. I cut my teeth in leadership basically in the TV industry, and then made that transition over to education. Unfortunately, I was in New York when 9/11 happened, saw the second towers fall down, and I said, it's time for me to make this change. So I kind of married my love for education, my love for TV, and taught television production. Within that, I created a nonprofit organization called Arts Equality, formerly known as the 10-Day Film Challenge. And this came about because I just wanted to test my teaching skills. And I said, I'm going to give these kids 10 days to create a film under these particular guidelines and see what happens. And then I put them inside of a movie theater to watch their movies take place. And 9 years after that, we were in 9 different countries. So Arts Equality, unfortunately, COVID has slowed things down for us on that front, but hopefully we'll be able to bounce back up. I am also an assistant coach at Rowan University women's basketball program. I also have 2 beautiful daughters. I just do a whole bunch of stuff, and I figured that if I have some information, I would share it with people. I wrote a book about my life called Life Music, and we do a podcast called the Empowerment Perspective Podcast. You can check all that information out on the empowermentperspective.com. But enough of me. This particular presentation, I broke down into 3 sections. The first one is inspiration, because I really think is it important for us to figure out before we even get into the interview why we are going to go for this particular job in educational leadership in the first place. Here at the Empowerment Perspective Group, every time we present, we talk about the why we do things that we do, and why it's important for us to have a strong why. We believe that the why shapes our behaviors and shapes, especially when it becomes difficult times, we be able to get over that hump. And here's a video that kind of shows you the importance of a why.
So you're a musical director? Yes, sir. All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? Now, once you give it a version, is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the good version real quick. If you know which version I'm talking about, just see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that
So that particular video demonstrates exactly the importance of the wives. The exact same song, but when the reason behind why he sung that song changed, it completely changed the whole feel and the whole dynamics of the song. So I encourage you, if you know your why in the chat, I would definitely put that in the chat right now, or why you do what you do, or why you are trying to aspire to be what you are trying to accomplish at this particular moment in time. My why is very, very simple. Like I said earlier, I have two beautiful daughters, Jaden and Simone. So that's the reason why I do what I do. And if you walk in my office, their pictures are strategically placed in my office. So when I'm having difficult conversations with parents or teachers, it kind of reminds me why I do what I do. So let's get into this a little bit in terms of having a vision. Now, listen, I was not a person that believed in vision boards at first, but then I created one and about 99% of it actually became true. So it's the same in terms of the job that you want before we even get into the interview process. Asking yourself, why do you want to be an administrator in the first place is an important part of that process. So you need to make sure you understand why you want to do this in the first place. You also need to understand what type of school do you want to work in before you even apply. Is it a diverse community, or are you looking for a middle-class community, or what kind of community do you want to spend the most of your time in is important. I know trying to get the job as an administrator is important to you, and you kind of just want to get your feet wet, and some of you might want to just take the first thing that comes. I'm going to tell you that it's going to be a miserable existence if you do that. So make sure that you are very strategic in terms of the community that you want to serve. Like for me, for example, I look for a diverse population. I look for students that kind of remind me of myself when I grew up, and that's the kind of environment that I kind of go for. So that is really important. Also, what type of community do you want to serve? Is it an inner city school? Is it a rural school? Again, the diversity. Is there a downtown? Like, how close is the community? One of the number one questions that I ask applicants all the time is, tell me what you know about our community. This is a really, really important thing. So make sure that you have a clear picture of what it is that you would like to, what community that you would like to definitely serve. And the last point here is, what motivates you? Again, what drives you and what's your purpose in terms of what you're going to do? Second part of this thing is about preparation. I need to change my layout here. There we go. Perfect. Know what you are about to walk into. This is where your research is going to come in handy in terms of your interview process. So I grabbed a couple of postings that are out there. These are all from the state of New Jersey. And the postings are going to tell you specific information about that school. They're going to give you a lot of them give you a lot of information on what your day-to-day life is going to be like. And some of the things that I personally look for is, one, how many years of experience are you expected to have? Some say 3, some say 5, some say teaching at elementary or secondary level, as you can see there. So it's important for you to understand what they are looking for. And then when you go to your resume, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we're going to start digging into what those leadership experiences mean, because obviously if you're new to this, you're not going to have administrative leadership skills, but maybe you're a basketball coach, or maybe you run a certain program in your school. Those are leadership positions as well. So when you start building your resume, start thinking about those things. The other one that I highlighted here is demonstrate leadership skills in the area of curriculum development and program evaluation, staff development, and school improvement. So that may be something that you want to sink your teeth into. In the previous part 1, we talked about The life of administrator is completely different than the life of a teacher. You're going from actually educating students to actually running a building. And then sometimes you kind of lose that touch with students in a different way. So the one way to regain that is to figure out how you can embed yourself into curriculum development, program evaluation, and those things. And also staff development can also help, bridge that gap. In the state of New Jersey, I'm not sure about other states, but what we're finding now is there is administrators that are doing combination of things. So you might be an assistant principal, but you also might be an athletic director. You might be the head of the music department as well. So you're starting to see a lot of combined positions out there. So make sure that you are also paying attention to those things as well. Some postings here, again, essential functions, what I look for, and this one that I highlighted, if you can do anything before you even get to become an administrator to master, is to understand scheduling. That will set you apart from a lot of other people. Preparing class schedules, master schedules, extracurricular activities is huge, especially today with COVID, with schools closing and opening, schedules changing. If you can master that, it's going to set yourself apart from your competition that's going in for these interviews. Also, continuing to acquire professional knowledge and learn content developments in the educational field. So are you the type of person, I believe if you're in education, you are a lifelong learner. Just because you got that particular job or you're teaching or you're an administrator, you should always be researching the latest trends in education and the latest professional development things. And also being able to create professional development for your staff as well. Supervising departments as assigned. So in my particular school, as an assistant principal, I'm also in charge of the third grade as well. So there again, this goes back to what I said earlier in terms of serving multiple positions. So understand that your experiences as any supervising role is going to hopefully set you apart from everyone else. Assisting recruitment and selection of employees is a huge one. We touched on part one as well. You need to have the ability to be able to assess new talent coming in. So it's important to have the right people on the bus, but it's also important to have the right people in the right seats on the bus. So these are just, again, some of the things in the postings that I've seen that you might want to take a look at. Although most assistant principals don't deal with budget, again, to set yourself apart from everything else is to understand budget and understand the financial affairs of the school and how to move money around in different areas. It's important, especially now with all the federal aid that's coming out with the COVID and the pandemic situation, having a grasp and understanding of that, again, is something else that might set you apart from your competition. Your knowledge and skills and abilities. You obviously need to understand the various teaching methods and the educational pedagogy, as well as differentiating instructions. Again, this is probably going to come from your experiences within the classroom if you have that. If not, I implore you to make sure that you are doing research about that. Everything in education is data driven. So understanding how to read data and also how to use it correctly to develop programs and the needs within your buildings is also key. So again, I'm just giving you some ideas of what some postings are going to say out there and some of the things that you might want to start thinking about to build up your individual resumes. The ability to implement projects. Again, this goes back to being able to analyze data and coming up with some original ideas that are budget friendly, that's going to be able to help your particular school that you are serving. You need to have the ability to multitask. I write a list every single day and that list never ever gets done because something new always happens. Later, we're going to talk about specific questions that you might be asked in the interview process. Multitasking is really, really important as an assistant principal or any administrative role as well. So sharpening up those skills is also important. Let's get to your resume. All right. Number one point here is everything on your resume speaks. Even the things that you are not saying will speak to whoever's looking on your resume. So we'll talk about this again later, but what I personally look for, are there gaps in your employment? Can you justify, explain why that there's gaps in your employment? Is there a high turn? Are you a high turnover candidate? Or are you in a school system maybe 1 or 2 years and then you keep bouncing around? Those are some of the things that need to be explained when you go into your interview. So those things in your resume, everything speaks within your resume. Me personally, my resume is multiple pages. I know some people say it should only put singular pages in there, but I kind of tailor, because I have a lot of experiences, tailor my resume to that specific job posting that I showed you earlier. Again, tailoring your skills and your experiences to that job posting is important. Here's a little psychological tip that I actually learned from my brother. He is an engineer. He works for the company Bose, and he used to travel the world before the pandemic, and he used to meet with these clients. And a story he told me, he said one client was partners with, I believe, Apple. And he went into the meeting. So the things that he would do is would make sure that he carried an Apple computer in there. Or if the company was a Dell supporter, he carried a Dell computer in there. So I started doing little minor things with my resume. My resume has a border around it, and typically it's the color of the school. So very subtle that I'm applying for. So our school, for example, colors are blue and white. So I made sure my border and my layout was blue and white. Made sure all the folders and everything in there were blue and white. It kind of just set me apart a little bit, showed that I was meticulous about the things that I was delivering during the interview process. So taking a look at some of those little psychological things, they at least get someone thinking that this person took time to actually research some information might be helpful. Now, what do I look for? Again, number one, your schooling. Networking is important. I'm so glad so many of you are on LinkedIn and you are making connections on LinkedIn. Continue to do that, because somebody will know somebody who can give you either a job posting or at least give you a leg up in it. I'll tell you right now, I went to Temple University for my undergrad. Anyone that comes through my office and is looking for a job from Temple University, I automatically give them an opportunity for an interview, just because that's how I operate, and might be a little bit petty, but that's how I am. So also, make networking. Networking is a huge part of being able to at least get an interview. Oftentimes, matter of fact, now that I think about it, every job that I had so far is because I knew somebody, not necessarily about what I knew, but because I knew somebody. That conversation at least got me into the door. Also, again, like I said, I look for your work history. But also when I look at your employment, I also think about, who do I know there? My network is expansive, is huge. So do I know someone that works there that I can have a conversation off the records about you and your work ethic? So be careful, don't burn any bridges, because administrators, we are looking for any information that is going to be helpful. Again, your turnover rate, but more importantly, what special skills do you possess? What value can you bring to my school and organization is important. What unique programs could you bring in? What kind of, are you a good communicator? Are you a good people person? What is the value that you can bring to our school? That has to be expressed within your resume. Oh, this is a big one. Your social media is a part of your resume. If you want to put your information out there, the number one thing that I do is I look on your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn. I want to know what kind of person you are. Quick story, I had a young lady that was applying for a teacher position. Resume was stellar. Interview was off the charts. Something told me to go on her Facebook. When I went on her Facebook, made it public, I saw some inappropriate things on her Facebook. As a result, she did not get the job. So be careful. You are a public figure. And when you become an administrator, you are even more public. So you need to make sure that your social media is squeaky clean as best as you can, unless you want them to find out about some information about you that could deter them from actually interviewing you or possibly giving you the job. So your social media footprint is huge. Pictures and brochures. Me personally, I'm not a fan of you putting your picture on your resume or your cover letter, unless it's a professional picture. I had one gentleman come in for an assistant principal job at another district that I was working for. And at the top of his resume, he had a picture with his sunglasses on, and it looked like he was in his car. So when he came into the interview, guess what he had on his forehead? Those sunglasses that he was in that picture. I said, you can't, he's not professional enough for me. You can't put that on your resume. Had another young lady bring in a brochure, had wonderful information in it, all the programs and stuff that she was doing, but in the background of that picture were beer bottles. Be careful with what you are putting on your resume. Again, everything speaks. Be careful and be meticulous. In regards to time slots, here's the thing that I kind of live by. If you have the opportunity to pick your time slot, this is what I go by. It may not fit you, but this is what I do. When you are the first person to be interviewed, everyone else will be compared to you. Or if you are last, you are the last thing that's going to be on their minds. I never, ever try to pick any middle time slot if I can help it. I always want to either set the tone for the interviews, or I want to be the last thing that's on their brain when they're finished all of their interviews. So it's a matter of taste, but those are some of the things that I kind of do. Make sure you are doing your research. It is wiser to find out than to suppose, as what Mark Twain said. First thing I would look up is how many administrators are in that building, how many administrators that are in that particular district. Some districts, you might be the only assistant principal, and there might be a principal. Some districts might just have a principal who serves as a disciplinarian. Some larger districts may have two. So figuring out how many administrators are important, because it's also, you need to figure out how you're going to be working with these particular people. Understanding who you are working for as well. As I stated, you're going to be, in part one, we talked about the relationship between the principal and the assistant principal, and understanding what type of person they are. If I were you, just like I go on social media and look at their stuff, your stuff, I would go on social media and look up your principal, your potential principal administrators, just to see what type of person that you're going to be spending a great deal of time with, see if you can get some information off of these people. What size is the district? As my one of my favorite rappers says, more money, more problems. The bigger the district, yes, you will make a little more money typically, but that means you're going to have more problems to solve. So again, it goes back to your vision, or what type of district you want to work into. You want a small district or a big district? Again, the big districts, more money, more problems for you to solve. Are you that type of person that's going to want to work in that particular environment? Going back to your network, connecting with an insider is important. Again, shout out to LinkedIn. That's a great starting point. So if you could get out there and meet people in that district and get an inside of what that school is actually about and what they're looking for, it's going to kind of set you apart. So some of the things that I would ask someone what's the prevailing issues within that district. Now, keep in mind that, you might be talking to somebody that might have a certain view, but at least they'll give you a broad picture of what's happening in that school. I had an interview with the school district, and the school district really wanted me, and they kept asking me to come back. And then I had an insider talking about there were some social, emotional, as well as some equity issues within the school. So I had to think to myself, am I ready to handle and tackle that task? How is the staff going to receive my approach to it? So these are some things that when you're researching the particular schools that you are applying for, make sure that you are doing your due diligence. Also, the turnover rate for administrators. Some districts, there's high turnover. The last district that I was in at the middle school level, I worked probably with, I would say, 5 or 6 assistant principals within a 6-year span. So is there high turnover rate? So that's going to give you an indicator that one, that the culture and climate of the school, as well as the district as well. Do they promote within? So some of those things also are important. How many principals were assistant principals in that district, or do they hire from without? So outside. So these are some of the things that you need to ask. The culture and climate of the school, what kind of programs they have, how's the student body, get as much information and a clear picture about the school before you even start your interview process. The next stuff really is available to you online. State scores, parent reviews, I do click on them, but I know that you're either two types of people that are on there. Either they're praising the school or they're trashing the school. But I kind of get an idea of what some of the parents and students are saying on these websites as well. The demographics, again, what kind of student bodies do you want to serve? You want a diverse community or not? That's important. Also look at their policies, because as an administrator and specifically assistant principal, you're going to be dealing with policies. What does their policy say about their school? And you know, it kind of gives you an idea of what some of the things that you will be dealing with inside of their school. Also, visit the place that you're going to be working. Go downtown, go to the local coffee shop, sit down there and observe, talk to the people, because again, these are the people that you're going to be serving. These are the people in the community that you're going to be a part of. So make sure that you are comfortable with that situation. And this is, again, you're going to find yourself miserable if you're just taking the first thing out there and that community is not you. So you need to make sure that you are doing your research in regards to that. Part 3, execution. Controlling the interview. Remember, this is your interview as much as it is theirs. So being able to, I know some people have high anxiety when it comes to interviewing. One, you know your skill set better than anybody else. So there's confidence in there. But also you need to be asking yourself, can I work with these people? So when you're sitting there and you're answering questions and they're asking questions, you need to also be doing an assessment of, can I work with these people? It is your interview as much as it is theirs. So that's one key to kind of overcoming anxiety. You can look up other stuff too about breathing and all that stuff. But one of the things that has personally helped me is I sit there and I look and say, can I work with these people? Now there's certain interviews I wish I could get up after the first question because I know I can't work with these people. And they're not my speed. They're not there, you know, we're not sharing the same characteristics. So I wanted to get up and leave, but make sure that you're doing an assessment as well. Also, to overcome, like, what's the worst that possibly can happen? I'm going to play this video.
Hi, how's it going? Good. So, you want to stand or sit? Okay, great. So, let's stand. Okay. We'll sit. Okay. What was your name? I'm sorry. Charity. Charity. What's up, dude?
Nothing really. Just.
Is that a perm?
Excuse me?
A perm?
No, this is natural.
Oh, cool. What can I do for you?
I would like a job with your company.
Oh, great. This is a very well-formatted resume.
Thank you.
That's one thing about resumes. What were you hoping to make?
Money-wise, how much am I looking to make?
Yeah. What were you hoping the salary would be?
Maybe 30 to 40.
Okay, it's not going to be anywhere near that.
Okay, it was just the job listing said.
I know.
37.
How am I going to get people in here?
Now, there's no interview that's going to look like that. Like, that's the worst that possibly can happen. So I'm like, you know, what's the worst could happen in terms of the interview, in terms of them asking questions and behaving a certain way? Again, you know your skill set. Again, you should go in with the perspective of, this is my interview as well. Do I fit here? Is my skill set going to be beneficial here? So also make sure that you are assessing the school that you are interviewing with. What are some of the things that you should bring with you? Let's talk about attire. I shouldn't have to say this, and I really shouldn't, but I just did interviews actually 2 days ago, and people came in dressed like they had t-shirts on, they had jeans on. Some of them, I don't even think someone combed their hair. One lady came in smelling like cigarettes. Like, your attire is going to set the tone. So to me, if you're a guy and you're going to an administration and you're going in for administration, obviously a suit, blue or black suit. Make sure that your tie is all the way buttoned up and tied all the way to the top. Believe it or not, I got criticized with one interview I went on and my tie wasn't all the way up. I had a little bit of space so I can breathe, and they didn't like that. So make sure that you are put together. I wouldn't do too much jewelry. Ladies, again, business attire is important. I wouldn't do too much jewelry, too much perfume or cologne, but make sure that you look like an administrator when you walk into these interviews. No sunglasses, like I said before. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I literally just interviewed 3 people the other day, and they came in like they were coming off the beach, it does not make any sense to me. Of course, they did not get the job. Bring with you your portfolio. What should you have inside of this portfolio? Any presentations that you have done? If you have not done any presentations for your staff or anything, ask your principal if you can present on something that you're passionate about. Keep the slides, keep the video, whatever the case may be, but bring your presentation. Any programs, obviously your resume. I would bring letters of recommendation. Make sure that they're up to date. A lot of people write letters of recommendation and put the date on there, and there's from 3, 4, 5 years ago. Make sure that your recommendations are up to date. Bring with you your certifications. So in New Jersey, if you have your CE or if you actually have your principal cert, make sure you bring those, as well as your teaching certs and all those things. One trick that I will give you is I would put together a 3-month timeline. And within that timeline, I would say, in the first 3 months of my job, here are the things that I'm going to do. Now, most of the things that in that particular timeline are about relationship buildings. I'm going to meet the head of the union, the building rep in the union. I'm going to obviously meet administration. I'm going to talk to maintenance. What are you going to do in those first 3 months when you first get that particular job? That's also going to be determined by what time of the year you get potentially get the job. So if you're going for a position that's in the middle of the school year, your timeline is going to look a little bit different because you're going to be thrown in the middle of it. Whereas if you're going in the summertime where school's not in session, your timeline is going to look a little bit different. But I would put together a projection of some of the things that you have in your mind, that how you would introduce yourself to the staff and the students and the community, put those things in a timeline. So those are some things that I would put in there that a lot of people are not doing within your portfolio. Bring your notepad. I, as an administrator, especially as an assistant principal, I have a saying that if you don't write it, it never happened. So there's times where you might have to, the case might have to go to court, and they might summons your notebook, and you are trying to think about some of the things that happened in that particular case. Write it down. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. One way to demonstrate that you understand this is by bringing your notebook to the interview. So when they ask you a question, I would jot a few notes down, because it's letting us know that you are thinking about the process, that you are keeping a record of the process, and that you are answering the question to the best of your ability. So make sure that you are bringing a notepad. Obviously, you need to have something to write with. If you have a lucky pen, bring that. Make sure that it obviously works. If some interviews, you actually have to do a presentation. I've seen school districts actually ask assistant principals to do a quick presentation. Again, going back to the posting, if the school asks for programs and things of that nature and professional development, some may ask you to do a quick presentation where you obviously are going to need to have your computer, flash drive, or something along those lines to bring to your interview. Just because you bring it don't necessarily mean you're going to use it. I would make sure that you do that. Number one, it should be number one on the list, is bring your personality. Be you in the interview. Try to relax. And if it's about, education is about connecting with people. So you need to be able to connect with the people that you are interviewing with. But I wouldn't go overboard. Just be yourself, bring your personality. Find some happy medium from being over the top and, not, being boring at the same time. Woo, turn off your cell phone. Huge one. Obviously, you don't want phone calls in the middle of the interview. There's people that record the interview. I don't necessarily recommend that. I know people record it so that they can assess what how they did. But I wouldn't necessarily do that, because I was actually on an interview where a person was recording it and they must have hit something and they played back what was just said. It was a complete turnoff in the interview. But I would turn off your cell phone before you actually go into the interview. Arrival times. Again, for me personally, because I'm the type of person that works better under pressure. I always sit in the parking lot, and 5 minutes before I'm actually supposed to go into the interview, I'll walk into the office, because I don't like sitting in the office or the waiting area for minutes on end and starting thinking about all these things. I'm the type of person that let's just go in there, let's get it done. I'm gonna deliver what I need to deliver, and I'm out of there. If you're not that way and you want to get there early, that's obviously a choice of yours. But when you are sitting in the office, especially if you're in the main office, look around, assess the office. These are going to be your secretaries that you're probably going to be working with, the people that the office that you're going to be spending a lot of time in, depending on where you're doing the interview. Take a look, see how they're interacting. You don't have to say anything to them, but again, it's your interview as well. You're trying to figure out if you fit here as well. So make sure you're assessing the office. What type of phone calls are they getting? How are they responding? What's their customer service look like? So you are making an assessment of that school as well. Who's going to be in the interview? Typically speaking, for administrative positions, there's going to be a panel or a team. Typically round one, the principal that you're going to be working with. There might be a supervisor, let's say it could be a health PE supervisor, it could be an English supervisor. Typically, the supervisor will give you an indication of where they see is important for their school. So if an English supervisor is in there, maybe reading scores are low. If their math supervisors are in there, maybe their math scores are low. Teacher typically might be in there as well. I've been on interviews where students were actually in there, as well as parents on the first round. I've been on interviews and seen interviews where the student resource officer was in there, or your substance accord, your SAC, your substance, what do you call those things? I'm having a brain fart. But your SAC in there, your anti-bullying specialist might be in there, because you're going to be working with those people as well. Expect the unexpected on the first round too, because I've been on situations where you walk into the gym and there was a table full of students, there was a table full of parents, there was a table full of board of education members, table of administrators, and we were in the gym, so they put 5 minutes on the clock, and it was kind of like speed dating. I talked to the students, I talked to the parents, I talked to the administrators, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some weird ones that are out there as well, but typically your principal, supervisor, a teacher, maybe a secretary might be in there. Round two, typically there's 2 rounds. You'll have principal or principals in there. Your assistant superintendent or your superintendent, maybe a board of education member in there, human resource director might be in there, depending on the role of the human resource director, again, parents, and they all will typically follow a rubric, and they'll be writing down your answers to these specific questions. Let's take a minute, because we're in this space, to talk about virtual interviews. Interviews that you'll be obviously at home or in your office space answering questions. Make sure your computers are charged, that you have a strong Wi-Fi signal. If you have the opportunity to have an external microphone, make sure that you do that, because it just sounds clearer than your computer microphone. Watch your background. I would stay away from the virtual backgrounds unless you have a green screen actually generated. But if you're in your home, make sure what's behind you is cleaned up. I would just pick a clear wall and put it behind you, or if you have a bookcase or something, a bookshelf, something that looks educational, maybe put that back there. But I've seen people that have interviews and the background's a mess. So that's telling me that you might not be organized. So again, everything speaks during your interview process. If it's virtual, have electronic copies of everything, your resume, your presentations, et cetera, because you may be asked to present certain things during that interview process. Make sure you close unnecessary windows and applications. Your camera, computer camera, should be eye level. Right now, I'm actually got my computer on a stack of encyclopedias because they are useless to the day. I don't even know where these encyclopedias came from, but make sure that it's eye level, and make sure that you don't have too much space above your head, and make sure that you are looking obviously directly at the camera. Do not, when you make eye contact in virtual world, don't look at the screen and you're talking to the person, because it's going to look like you're not looking at them. Look directly into your camera and answer those questions in there. Also, in a virtual environment, be prepared to wait. It's technology. People lose connections, et cetera, et cetera. So you might be in a waiting room for a while, so be prepared to wait, especially if you're not the first one. All right, let's dig into some questions. number one thing I would say is to pay attention to the type of questions that they are asking you, because it's going to give you a vision of what that school is currently dealing with. What kind of questions are they asking you? Are they talking about drugs and weapons in there? Are they talking about irate parents? Are they talking more about assessments? What type of questions are they asking? Because obviously if they're asking you this, you're going to have to be able to deal with it. And this is what the school is currently dealing with. Hint number, I guess, 4080. When you are talking and they're going to be writing down your responses, chances are, right? When they stop writing, you either need to stop talking or switch your topic. That means that, again, there's usually a rubric that they're following. Either you hit all the points that they were looking for, or you are completely off the mark. Again, I had interviews the other day, and I literally probably wrote down one word, and then the lady just kept talking, and everybody that was on the panel, their pens dropped, and she just kept talking. I was like, she has no idea that she's completely missing the mark. So a little hint there is when the people stop writing, you either answer fully or you need to switch it up and try to respond differently. Some typical questions. Any interview, first question usually is tell us about yourself. Have a little story about your journey of how you got to where you are and why you are here. You know, you went to certain school, you know, you love kids, you love interacting with students, and this person was influential to me, et cetera, et cetera. Tell your story, but be mindful of the time. You don't have to go all the way back to when you were born and, you know, all those things. So make sure that it's relevant to the position as well. They're going to ask you what your strengths and weaknesses are. Here's a little tip. You need to be able to flip your weaknesses so that they sound like a strength. For example, one of my weaknesses is that I procrastinate. So I'll say I'll procrastinate. But the reason I procrastinate, because my strength is I work better under pressure. So my procrastination does not necessarily sound like it's going to be a hindrance. Like I can recover from my weakness. So try to flip your weaknesses to make them sound like strengths. Some things that you could be thinking about before you actually go into the interview. Have an understanding or have what your educational philosophy and discipline philosophy are. Make sure that you have those things down, especially if you're going for the assistant principal role. Your discipline philosophy is important. So I would even write that down, 4 or 5 sentences, and make sure that you have that ingrained in your brain so that you can deliver that. Be able to give a definition of what you think a good leader is. Important too is why do you want to work here? Again, goes back to your research and understanding why you are going for that particular job in that particular school is important. You need to have a story on how you overcome challenges. That's also an important thing because as an administrator, you're going to be faced with a lot of challenges. How do you overcome those things is important. Let's move on. Now, here's the real questions. Those are the standard questions. Here's some real questions that they're going to be asking you. You're going to need to display, again, your ability to multitask. So a lot of these questions, some of them are going to be scenario-based questions, something along the lines of you have an irate parent waiting for you, you have a teacher that needs something from you, and then you have a student that is, let's say, injured. How do you handle this? So they're going to think about how you're going to multitask those situations, but also delegate responsibilities. So, greeting the parent is important, letting that parent know that you're going to be there in a second. Maybe that's something for the teacher that you can email and we can touch base later. But the number one priority while you are there as an assistant principal is the safety of the students. If you think students first, you'll never, ever go wrong. So especially if the student is hurt or suspected to be hurt, those are the things that you're going to attend to first. Maybe there's a guidance counselor or another staff member that may be able to handle some of those other tasks while you handle the important element of that question. So scenario-based questions are important. You're probably going to get a question about harassment, intimidation, and bullying. You need to understand what your laws are in your state in regards to that. And in most school districts will have a bully policy available to the public on their website or on their within their handbook or something along those lines. And it kind of spells out the steps of what you need to take in terms of handling those claims. There's always, well, typically, I'm not say always, there's also situations where a scenario where you have to describe how you're going to handle a conflict. Sometimes it's a fight, sometimes there's weapon. Again, if you think student safety first and then proceed from there, typically you'll answer the questions correctly. And understanding the available resources that are around you to be able to handle those are important. Same thing with drugs as well. That involves bringing the nurse. Again, your SACs and anti-bullying specialists might serve multiple purposes. So that's important to make sure that you are handling those things. Again, student safety is number one. So this is why we want to make sure the nurse is involved, make sure the student's okay, make sure we're locating, obviously, the drugs. And if you have to do searches and things of that nature, you're going to make sure that there's someone else present to do non-invasive searches if your school permits those things. So understanding how to handle those problems are important. A huge one now, especially because we're dealing with a lot of equity and race relation within our nation and within our schools. There might be scenarios in which they're going to ask you, how would you solve this particular problem? One example that I can remember off the top of my head, there was a group of African-American students that were upset, the seniors, during graduation time or at the end of the school year. Another student, there was a white student that did video of the senior class, but they did not include any African Americans. And so they were upset about it. They wanted to do a demonstration about it. And then some of the teachers wanted the students to be not allowed to walk in graduation. So how would you handle those types of situations are important as well. Being able to address struggling students. How are you going to go about or help close the achievement gap? The achievement gap has been in existence since school has been in America. So we need to figure out a way how you would address it specifically at that particular school. So, and again, understanding that school's data is important and their demographics are important as well. And how can you raise those or how can the school raise those test scores is important. Technology, you're going to get questions about technology, possibly, because we are now living in a day of pandemic. So I'm sure every school has either Google Classroom or some form of technology in the classroom. As an administrator, to be able to set yourself apart from other administrators, if you have a good understanding of technology and how to implement it in the classroom, it's going to set you apart from everyone else. So digging into that is important. Also, be ready to write your responses. There might be some writing prompts, and schools do this so that they have an understanding of how you're going to correspond to parents and to the public, because you have to be able to write emails, newsletters, and things of that nature. So they want to see your writing style and your writing skills as well. And that might be scenario based as well. Teacher observations. They're going to ask you what makes a good lesson. You know, the beginning, closing, anticipatory sets, all that stuff that makes good observations. What you look for is in a good lesson. Exit tickets, how you're going to close the lesson and those things. Also, if you have a struggling staff member, how are you going to help that particular teacher? Professional development, matching them up with a stronger teacher, mentor, etc. So be able to answer those questions. At the end, the most famous question is, do you have any questions? Always have at least one or two questions, even if you know the answer to them. I wouldn't just say, no, I don't have any questions. Do not ask about salary. I would, especially at the first level. That will come later. When they offer you the job, they will say, this is what we're going to give you. You can always obviously say no. And it's based typically upon, steps in the contract. So it's not corporate America. You're not going to be able to negotiate huge salaries. It's kind of pretty much set in stone based upon that school district. So you kind of go into it having a general idea of what you're going to be making. Typically, again, the bigger the school district, the more money you're going to make, the more problems you're going to have to solve in as a role as an administrator. That's important. So make sure that you have questions. So after you've gone through round 1 and 2, what's next? Typically the third round, if it goes that far, you're down to your final 2 candidates. It's you and probably somebody else, or it might just be you. And typically this round is about your character. A lot of these interviews in the third round, especially if they kind of want to put you in that position, is kind of a meet and greet, kind of want to see what kind of person you are. Because they probably asked all the questions that they already wanted to ask in rounds 1 and 2. So make sure that you, again, appear appropriately, your attire is appropriate, but make sure that you're relaxed, again, because this is typically just about your character. A quick note about thank you notes and cards. They're great gestures, but I'm gonna tell you and be honest with you, as an administrator, when I get them, I look at it and throw in the trash. I don't send them out, but you can if you feel like you want to do that. But I tell you exactly, they might sit on the desk for 1 or 2 days, but they're definitely going into the trash. So just know that. From there, the process is that your principals can only recommend you for hire to your superintendent. Your superintendent recommends this is who we want to hire, typically to the Board of Education. The Board of Education makes the decision, yes or no. Sometimes you'll have to go to that board meeting. Sometimes you don't, depending on the school district. And then you might be in a situation where the board has to vote yes or no. And understand that process is a little bit weird too, because there might be members on the board who have spouses that work in the district or kids that work in the district and they can't vote. So typically they'll say that, I can't vote, and, they'll say yes or no. It's very rare that you'll probably be in there, but there might be some districts that will require that as well. Please know, depending on your contract in your state, that your school and your current position, if you signed your contract, there might be a 30 or 60-day period that they're not going to release you until those are up. I was actually in a situation where I moved districts and was held to my 60 days. Thankfully, I had vacation days, so I wasn't there. I just had a couple months off anyway, so before I actually started the job. So just understand that as well. If you're lucky enough, though, you might be able to get away with, if you didn't sign your contract for the next school year, July 1 comes around, you technically don't have a contract. If you get the job, then they might not be able to hold you to that 60 days, depending on your school district. Well, that's it for me. There's information here about the Empowerment Perspective Group. I definitely appreciate everyone for showing up tonight and taking your time. And I'm glad that the storms held off for me. But this is how we're going to do it. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat, or if you feel like and feel brave enough, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. I'll be here for a little bit. Again, thank you for showing up. Thank you, Jamie, for helping me out tonight. We are having part 3. Before we leave, we're having part 3 next Thursday, the 10th, and that is connecting the dots, and it's about how to use customer service to build relationships with your student, staff, and your community. Jamie Cohen will be joining me for that. And also be on the lookout for Empower Fest 22, which is going to happen in February. We're going to have our own conference with the Empowerment Perspective Group with different strands and things of that nature. So I definitely appreciate everyone for being here. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and if you have questions, I will gladly answer them.
We got some messages. We got some questions in the chat.
Hold on 1 second. Ooh, sorry, say it again.
We got some questions in the chat.
Okay, let me go here. Let me go. All right, what are your thoughts on digital portfolios? Again, it's in today's day and time, I definitely would go with the digital portfolio. I would have both, because there are some traditional schools out there that may not have the technology and be able to read whatever it is that you're sending them. But definitely, I would definitely create your digital portfolio and have your physical portfolio as well. Great question. QR codes is great. Anything that's you want to set yourself apart. That's the point of you going into these interviews. So if you have the ability to set QR codes, but make sure and be mindful that whatever you do, technology has to be user friendly, because the people that are actually interviewing you may not be up on what you're trying to tell them and show them. So make sure that you have that. What about I know this is about former interviews, but what about the initial interview that is usually a screening interview for 15 minutes? To me, those are about personality. So making sure that they're looking for a fit, typically personality wise and character wise. You're not going to be able to dig into too much of what you know, because it's only 15 minutes. So your personality is huge in terms of that that 15-minute flash interview. I would prepare for it just like I would prepare for a formal interview, but this is really more about your personality than anything else there. Let's see. Great questions. Many districts have those salary schedules on their website. Refer to them beforehand. Absolutely great point, Thurston. Does HR still screen resumes by hand, or do they screen them software-wise? I'm going to tell you, typically they print your resumes out and they will screen them that way. We're still in this interesting, I guess, era of administrators, especially if they've been there for a while, have their preferences of reading things physically because that's what they are used to. And for me personally, my eyes are going bad, so I don't like reading on the screen too much. So I'll print it out anyway. But they definitely typically will look at it from a piece of paper standpoint. Most of them will have a folder where they'll file them as well. Some school districts may be a little bit advanced more than others, and they might be able to have that digital file, but most of the times they're going to print them out and have them. And then when you're going for your interview, they're going to pass out those resumes for the panel as well. Apple Track, yes. Here's the thing about Apple Track. A lot of them will have this typical question like, what's your educational philosophy? They'll have these set questions. And multiple districts will use these things. My recommendation to you is to copy and paste it into a Word document so you don't have to rewrite it 1,000 times. So whatever you put in Apple Track, I would copy and paste it onto a Word document so that you can just copy and paste it to the multiple districts that you're going to be applying for. Do districts look at every candidate submission? It's going to depend on the volume that you get. Again, a lot of it has to, the first thing they're going to do is sift through, do they know anybody? So this is why your network is important. This is why knowing people is important. So make sure that your network is out there. I graduated in 2020, so many years experience in the Dropbox, only 3 to 5 years. So many submissions happen in days. Okay, so again, when it comes to your experience, you also got to, especially if you don't have, like you're fresh in the leadership role, trying to get this leadership position, start looking at things that you have done that made you a leader. You could be a sport, you could be captain of your basketball team, is technically a leadership position. Anything that's going to demonstrate your ability to lead people is something that you need to put on your resume. If you find that you don't have that many experiences there, you need to start building those things and getting that experience to put them on your resume. There's a lot of summer programs that look for leaders as well. That's actually one of the places that I started, is running it was a summer program for elementary school students. Even though I was a high school teacher, I went and made sure I ran that as well. So try to look for anything that you have from a leadership standpoint to put on your resume. All great questions. I'll be on for a few more minutes if anyone else. If not, you guys have a blessed evening. Thank you again for joining us, but I'll be on for a few more minutes if you have any additional questions. Awesome. You guys are welcome. I hope you guys have a great Friday and a great weekend. Father's Day is coming, so shout out to all the fathers that are out there. Appreciate you all. I'm actually going to go celebrate my mother's birthday. Take care, everybody.